Ready? All right, welcome everyone. Today it's hard to believe, but it is Monday, February 13th, and we'd like to kick off the Legislative Audit Commission. Today on our agenda, we're going to formulate the new Legislative Audit Commission and welcome new members. It's great to see everybody here. And so what we're going to do is do some introductions. Actually, sorry, we'll do the first thing. We'll do a roll call to ensure we have quorum. So if Ms. Gelb, if you could execute roll call. Here. 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 Here.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Gelb. We have a quorum. And so what we'd like to do is I'll start off with introductions. We'll do kind of a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get rolling on electing new leadership, and then we'll get on to the description of the Legislative Audit Commission, the Legislative Auditor, and then the subcommittee roles and opportunities for us to consider in the future. So with that, I am State Senator Mark Cran, Senate District 28, represent most of almost and all of Chisago and Nicene counties. I was elected in 2016, and I actually cherish this role like more than any other role in the legislature. This is it'll be my 40th year come April, either working in and or around in the government. And so to be able to play an integral role with the legislative auditor and understand what they do, it's the eyes and ears, and it literally is the thing that we unite on. And we hope everybody in this body continues to work on that. The preservation of this institution, because it's vital for us and our citizens. So thank you. Mr. Hanson.
Rick Hanson, House District 53B. I represent South St. Paul, parts of Inver Grove, Newport, St. Paul Park, part of Cottage Grove, and part of Great Cloud Island Township. New district for me, both sides of the river. And I was first elected in 2004, and I have been on the Audit Commission since that time. So I guess I'm a veteran member, but not as much of a veteran as some. I think echoing Senator Cran, this is a real good commission where we work together. We have made some reforms on a bipartisan basis over the last few years of setting up a budget process and performance reviews. And I think that's a foundation we can build upon in the future. So I look forward to working with him.
Thank you, Representative Hanson. And so let's start off on to my right, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Fu Lee, District 59A in North Minneapolis. This is my fourth term, first term on the commission. Really looking forward to working with everyone on here to ensure that whatever we do at the state of Minnesota, we are accountable to the citizens of the state. Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Scott Dibble, and I represent Senate District 61, which is most of Southwest Minneapolis, about half of downtown, a little sliver of North Minneapolis. And I'm really, really happy to be on this commission. I've never served on it. However, I have relied heavily on the work of the auditor and the Office of the Legislative Auditor on a number of things in years past, probably most notably, the work that was done looking at long-term care and assisted living, which gave rise to huge transformation and reform of that whole area of service, which was an extremely important piece of work that I was really grateful for, because it all started with the conversation in my office from constituents who had terrible stories to tell and had no ability to really understand what was really happening from a systemic basis, from a broad, had no way of getting my arms around it. Could have thrown in a bunch of bills and chased my tail forever without really making the case. And the work they did really brought those issues to light, which then sparked a newspaper investigation and created a huge effort in the legislature. So that's the kind of work that this commission and this office can do. So I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Representative Emma Greenman. I represent basically the whole swath of South Minneapolis. This is my second term, first term on being on the Audit Commission, and I think I echo Senator Dibble. I have spent the last year and a half citing line and verse of the 2007 OLA report about misclassification of employees. So of employees as independent contractors. And so after some good conversations with Representative Hansen, who is a true champion of this commission, I'm really grateful to be here and for the work ahead.
Thank you, Representative Greenman. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Senator. Steve Drazkowski, Senate District 20. I represent all of Wabasha County, most of Goodhue County, the eastern geographic half of Olmsted County, the western fringe of Winona County, and 2 precincts in Dakota County. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a program evaluation on MnDOT, because on my way up, one of the signs that's supposed to help us with traffic said, "Kiss me, I'm sober." Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Were you upset you weren't kissed? Then I don't want to bring that up, but we'll leave that for another conversation. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Senator Coran. Senator Barr, North Anoka County, and I stole 1 precinct from Senator Coran. That's my District 31. 3 terms in the House, first term in the Senate, and I first new to the Audit Commission, and I'm really looking forward to, I guess, helping to utilize the taxpayer money in the most efficient manner possible.
Thank you, Senator Barr. Representative Anderson. Excellent. Thank you, Representative. I'm glad you're here. Senator Rest. No throwing barbs at you, younger representative over here, sitting to my right. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ann Rust, represent District 43, which is some western suburbs, Crystal, Golden Valley, Plymouth, Robbinsdale, and New Oak, which is where I live. And I've been on the Legislative Audit Commission over 30 years. And I too, I'm so happy to hear the comments of both Senator Coran and Representative Hansen. They are indeed true believers. And one of our jobs is not only to direct the work of a legislative auditor, but to defend the office's independence from anyone's influence, including other elected officials, in any part of our government. And we do that with we do that with fury sometimes, because it's necessary. And I've chaired the commission, I think 5 times, when it was in either in the House or in the Senate. And it too, I think it's not only a place where I'm proud of belong. I think it is one of the jewels of Minnesota's government, recognized throughout the country for the work that it does by NCSL and others, wins lots of awards. And Ms. Randall has been a long-term employee of the auditor's office. She has assumed the leadership of it with grace and intelligence, and we are so lucky to have her.
Thank you, Senator Rest, and welcome, a fresh new face as
Yes,
well, Senator John.
I'm Senator Tu Zhang, Senate District 44, sort of the northeast metro, Maplewood, Oakdale, North St. Paul. And it's a pleasure to be here on this commission and being back with my House mentor, Representative Hanson. And so if you have issues with me, go to him.
Thank you, Senator. And with that, oops, sorry. Thank you, Senator John. And with that, welcome again, the new members. It's so great to see fresh faces. I hope you, Senator Rest said, I think we defend this with vigor and enthusiasm with every element or muscle in our body, because it is, I think it literally is one of the most misunderstood entities we have, and one of the most vital that 99% of our citizens have no idea it's a mere existence. And so we will do that, and we will work hard to make sure and keep that tone, that we do everything as bipartisan possible, keep our politics outside. We get the greatest opportunity to have a thorough overview of the work that's done. And it literally is the best thing. And we owe all citizens the respect of the work they do to make sure we give it every report its fullest extent, and make sure we focus on and guide them and provide them the resources so they can continue the great work. So with that, I think before we get going, I think I'd like to do a quick introduction of Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Judy Randall. I'm the Legislative Auditor. It's nice to see all of you here. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. As Senator Rest said, I've been a longtime employee of OLA. I've been with OLA since 1998, and I was appointed Legislative Auditor a year ago, November. So I'm still new in this role, but again, I've been with OLA for, I kind of say I grew up professionally at OLA on the program evaluation side. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I will note that this is the 50th year of OLA. This is our 50th anniversary. So not only is it mostly a new commission, but I think we've got something special to celebrate. So, you know, so far we're doing it in our typical understated way, which is we just put a little seal on our report and a little seal on our website, and that's about it. I don't really see us throwing a big 50-year bash, but I did want to just acknowledge that it's an important milestone for OLA, and it couldn't happen without the bipartisan, bicameral support that members before you have provided, and that I know you all will continue. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Randall. And before, hopefully, Rick, when we talk about the Legislative Audit Commission and the detail and the subcommittees and the roles, then I think it'd be great to have your two deputies give a brief introduction as well, since they're here. There's critical to this process as well. So with that, members, our goal is to elect a new chair and get our commission up and running, new chair, new vice chair. And with that, I think we'd be open for nominations. Senator Rest. Thank you, Representative Hanson. Want to do the votes individually? We can do voice. Okay, we can do voice vote. Any other nominations? Any other nominations for Rick, Representative Hanson for the chair? Seeing no further nominations, we'll close the nominations, and all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Excellent. Congratulations, Chair. I have to make one comment. Just because is 50 the golden anniversary? Or he's going to want a new gavel. So yeah. Congratulations, Representative Hanson.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We'll go right to nomination for vice chair. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd nominate Senator Cran for vice chair.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Congratulations, your vice.
Thank you.
Next, we will move into Ms. Randall, maybe discussing the subcommittees. The process is we usually do the subcommittee appointments, but we wanted to have a description of what they are so we can think about it and members can show interest. And Senator Cran and I will meet sometime during the week and with Ms. Randall and hopefully get the appointments made by the end. Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So historically, there have been three subcommittees that the Legislative Audit Commission has formed: the Executive Subcommittee, the Audit Subcommittee, and the Evaluation Subcommittee. So I'll run through each of them briefly. But of course, the Audit Commission can decide to create different subcommittees or can change the purview of the existing ones. The Executive Subcommittee has responsibility for the annual performance review of the Legislative Auditor, and then would oversee the process for appointing a new legislative auditor should that arise. I will note that I am appointed to a 6-year term, and I was first appointed a year ago, November. So in theory, that shouldn't be a responsibility over the next 2 years, assuming everything goes according to plan. But still, the executive subcommittee would be responsible again for the annual performance review of the legislative auditor, and then other commission-wide activities. Perhaps if the commission wants to develop some new policies or bylaws, I would expect those to go through the executive subcommittee. The second subcommittee is the audit subcommittee. This is a subcommittee that tends to hear the financial audit reports that our office releases. So as you probably know, we have kind of two big divisions: the financial audit division and the performance evaluation or program evaluation division. We also have a small unit of special reviews. So the audit subcommittee would hear the reports put out by the financial audit division, which are generally internal control and compliance audit reports that we do over state agencies. And so they would meet on an ad hoc basis, potentially year round. In past years, they have met anywhere between, I'd say, 4 times a year to 0 times a year, would depend on the chair and the members of that subcommittee. The third subcommittee is the evaluation subcommittee, and this would be the subcommittee that has the biggest hand in directing the work of the program evaluation division. In law, the audit commission selects the topics for program evaluations. We have developed over the years a pretty robust process for selecting topics. We can certainly get into that if you want. But basically, the evaluation subcommittee does a lot of the process and the filtering of topics to get to the final selection. The full audit commission ultimately votes on those topics and has final approval. So all members would have input, but the members of the subcommittee tend to have the most input in that process. The evaluation subcommittee may also hear releases of program evaluation reports. The evaluation subcommittee does need to meet to select those topics, and we need a quorum for that process. So that is probably the largest time commitment of the 3 subcommittees. And that subcommittee would meet, I would say, at least 4 times during session, because the topic selection process will probably get kicked off in the next week or so. And then that subcommittee will meet again several times between now and early April. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd say that's the brief overview. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those subcommittees.
And Ms. Randall, could you just state which evaluation reports are coming up and kind of the timeline so members can be prepared for those?
Mr. Chair, yes, thank you. So a week or 2 ago, I've already lost track of time, we released an evaluation on the oversight of state funded grants to nonprofit organizations. On Wednesday, we will be releasing our second program evaluation on sustainable building guidelines. After that, we have an evaluation on programs that serve Minnesotans on the basis of racial, ethnic, or American Indian identity. We have an evaluation on Rent Help Minnesota coming out. And then we have 2 evaluations on the Southwest LRT. And we broke that topic into 2 because for a variety of reasons. So those are the evaluations that are still forthcoming.
And Ms. Randall, maybe how many employees and kind of the
Sure.
structure and a little bit on budget, and
Sure.
maybe have the deputies come.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'll have the 2 deputies come up, and we'll have to, I think we might have to do rotating chairs to deal with the camera. So we'll figure that out on the fly here. OLA has a staff complement of 66 employees. About a little over half are in the financial audit division, and then about a third are in the program evaluation division. Then we have some folks in the special review group, and then our own IT support, and then our support staff. Our budget, we're dealing with some adjustments to the budget right now. But let me just pull up I don't have it in my mind, but I do have it on a piece of paper here, excuse me. So our current budget is around 17 million for the biennium. And we have submitted some requests through the LCC and that were approved last winter by the full audit commission to increase our budget to about 18.8 million for the biennium. And so those are going through the process right now. We are funded through the State Government Finance Committee. We again produce about 5 or 6 program evaluations each year and about 10 to 15 financial audits. And then our financial audit division also audits the state's financial statements each year. And then our special reviews, we handle those on an ad hoc basis. OLA receives, last year we received more than 350 reports of allegations, concerns of misuse of public funds, data breaches, et cetera. Many of them are anonymously reported to us, some of them are not. And so then we have a team of 2 special review staff right now who process those. And then the leadership team reviews them and decides which of those we can kind of dig in deeper. So right now that special review team is conducting a special review of the Department of Education's oversight of Feeding Our Future. So that's kind of the real high level. Let me turn to Ms. Rodriguez, who's sitting here. We're going to do a little musical chairs. She is the deputy for the Program Evaluation Division.
Just maybe Senator Cran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Randall, could you cover, you'd mentioned, you covered the 350 complaints. Could you just give an overview who they come from? I mean, I don't think people understand where the diverse group of people who communicate with you. So if you just give just a real brief overview.
Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Coran. Those 350 reports come from anybody you can think of. So we receive a large number from state agencies who are obligated by law to report to us any misuse of public funds. They also report to us data breaches or unintended releases of private data. We receive a large number from state agency employees, whistleblower, concerns of misdeeds within state agencies. And then we receive another large number from citizens who either see something that they don't think is quite right in state government or who believe that they have been mistreated by a state agency. And so a lot of times we can route these folks or these concerns to other places, and we try to do that. Sometimes, their concern might be better handled by the Department of Human Rights, for example, or it might be better handled by a human resources department within a state agency. But a lot of times they are under our purview. And so then we will either communicate with the agency and ask them to investigate, or we will put it on our list and hope that we can get to it as resources permit.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Jody Munson Rodriguez. I am the Deputy Legislative Auditor for Program Evaluation Division, and I was just appointed in December of last year. So I've only been in this position for a couple of months, but I have been with OLA for 11 years now. 6 of those were spent managing program evaluation. I'm leaning really close. I just most recently finished our evaluation of oversight of state-funded grants to nonprofit organizations. And I'm happy to answer any questions about PD or let Lori introduce herself.
Members, any questions? Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess my question is just general with the audits as they come forward. Does this group get an early evaluation from or early look at it from you folks, or what's customary? How's it work?
Ms. Munson Rodriguez.
Mr. Chair, Senator Jaskowski, by law, we are not allowed to provide our evaluations prior to their release to anyone, including the Audit Commission, but we do provide oral briefings prior to the release. So we offer those to the entire commission if they're interested in hearing some of our key findings and recommendations.
Senator Rest, do you want to give a little
just a bit of history on why we do not provide a copy?
Sure, the Legislative Audit Commission has gone through so many trials and tribulations, I guess. Not only about who a program evaluation was done on, like I think the biggest one that I remember is the Supercomputer Institute, which was extremely, might not sound like it should be controversial, but it definitely was. And then also it turned out that members of the commission were not particularly reliable in keeping reports confidential. And we would get early copies. And what would happen is the day before the report was issued, there would be a story in the newspaper or on TV presenting a particular bias about the reports. And everyone claimed that it wasn't them, but we were the only ones who had the report, so it had to be us. And so we decided, and certainly at the time, I think the governor was Arnie Carlson, who was very upset about reports that involved state agencies being released, or the content of them being released early. And so he became very upset with us. And we went, not only did we not allow written reports to be submitted to members ahead of time, the ones that were going to be published, but we limited our information to those informal briefings, which are done with nothing, no paper in front of us. It's just an oral report. So you don't get any piece of paper. They don't come in with any piece of paper. And the integrity of the office and the reports continued then to grow, because the entity that was the final say on the reports was not an interpretation by a legislator or by a governor or by a reporter, but by the legislative auditor's office itself. So it's a vast improvement in the outreach and communication, as was, by the way, too, when the Legislative Audit Commission was established. It was a commission of legislative leaders, and you were on the commission by virtue of the office that you held, like Speaker of the House, or the Majority Leader, or so on. And it was a commission that was not balanced, in that the majority party controlled it. And also under then Governor Carlson, that became highly unacceptable to him, and he was willing to shut us off, quite frankly. And so the reform that we came up with is represented right here. It's half Democrats, half Republicans, and half Senate, and half House. And the chairmanship rotates between the House and the Senate every 2 years, with the expectation that the majority party has the chairmanship, let's say this time in the House, but the majority party does not have the vice chairmanship. The minority party has the vice chairmanship regardless. So you don't have a Democrat being chair and vice chair ever, or as some of us would say, God forbid, the reverse. Okay. So that what that leads to, a little bit of editorial, is we seldom have any votes that are not 12-0. And that, I think, comes from our support from the OLA's office and her deputy commissioners, but also from the seriousness of purpose that we take for the job here, including defending the LAC from our fellow colleagues who always want to write in a piece of legislation, a report from the legislative auditor's office. And of course, they seldom want to give any money to do that. They just want her to do the work. And we discourage that greatly. You know, come and if your committee wants to do have an evaluation, write up a form or something and submit it just like anybody else, rather than mandating program. This is program evaluations, not the special investigations. And I think that us speaking out, whether it's on the House floor or Senate floor, to protect that workload also is very meaningful and is one of our jobs. And that's a longer explanation, but I think the Legislative Audit Commission has one of the most colorful histories in the legislature, as it has developed since 1973. Yeah, that's where we're 50 years in this, for the last 50 years. So little history.
Senator Rest, we've already stopped one in the House and state government.
Did you?
Finance.
Yeah. They'll be coming.
And then later. Ms. Layson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Lori Lyson. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for the Financial Audit Division. So our side of the office is a little different. We have approximately 35 employees, and we perform two types of audits during the year. We do the state's financial statements, which is the state's financial statements and the financial statements of the three public pension plans. And then for the remainder of the year, we do what we call our performance audits. And that's really looking at the internal controls and compliance within state agencies and entities. And so we typically select those. So we do not have the legislators determine those topics for us. We select those independently. And some of the kind of steps that we take and what we look at is the risk, the last time we've been there, possibly any complaints that have come through. And then we also do look to any legislative interest. So at the end of the calendar year, I do reach out to all of you and ask you if you have any topics you would like us to consider. And we have added those to our list in the January start of our performance audits. And in the last calendar year, we released 10 performance reports and we opined on 4 financial statements. And a couple of those reports that we've done was the Department of Human Services, Homelessness and Housing Grants. We did a performance audit on the Emergency Medical Regulatory Service Board. And we also did an IT audit on the MIX system, which is the immunization system. And then upcoming for this year, we're going to do 9 performance audits, and we'll still do our financial statements as well. And a couple of those topics, we typically rotate through the constitutional offices. So we'll be doing an audit of the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and we're going to do an IT audit of the unemployment insurance system. And then we're also doing, I'm not going to name all 9 topics, but we're also going to do a topic at Met Council as well in the Southwest Light Rail. And that is pretty much everything for the Financial Audit Division. I'll take any questions.
Members, any questions? Senator Dibble.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is, I usually read the financial evaluations because they're usually pretty short, pretty easy to read. Usually you find 1 or 2 or 3 fairly minor areas of concern that you make note of, you know, whether it's a separation of duties issue or some sort of procedural matter, fairly easy to remedy by the agency. How often do agencies button up their procedures and processes in response to those findings? Because they, you know, they're minor in nature, but they can have fairly significant consequences, especially like separation of duties types of things. Number one. Number two, how often do fairly routine financial audits Not just the, financial audit itself, but, the examination into practices give rise to more intensive in-depth review of the activities in the program delivery of that agency.
Ms. Lyson. Ms. Lyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Dibble. So yes, so I would say agencies, we're kind of like the quiet partner in the Office of the Legislative Auditor. We're holding agencies accountable. So we're looking in depth at payroll, receipts, and expenditures. It's not always super exciting, but we're looking at those internal controls and we're looking at compliance and saying, where are there weaknesses, right? Where are there things that you need to improve on so that we don't have something like feeding our future, right? That's our role, is kind of look at those things in depth with each of the agencies. So I would say overall agencies have been very receptive. It doesn't always mean that they'll immediately remedy each finding, but we do ask for a response in the report with a timeline of where they're going to resolve those findings, those written findings. And then in the Minnesota Management and Budget Office, they do have internal control accountability office that is responsible for following up on all findings and reporting on the status of those, which then we do get yearly so that we understand whether or not those have been resolved. And then the other question, I apologize, was going in depth. If we go in depth.
Senator Dibble.
Sure.
Ms. Lyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so it just depends on the audit. So we know right now we're going to do an audit of some overpayments that occurred in state government. And so we're going to delve really deep and we're going to do a full audit of all employees that receive some overpayments, and we'll delve deep into the agencies and their internal controls. And so I would say, it just depends on the year, but I would guess about 25% of our audits, there's something there that we're looking further into and going even deeper. We might pull some statistical samples. We don't always do that with, 30 some employees and going over 10 reports. We don't have the option of always doing a statistical sample, but we'll do some of that things. We'll do a lot of data analytics. So I guess about 25% are probably more deep dives into one area, as opposed to what we call our typical full scope audit of looking at, like I said, the payroll, expenditures, and revenue. Does that answer the question? I think.
Any other questions? Senator Krantz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Lyson. So when you talked about the rotational cycle of getting back to even the constitutionals, with that, how many years does it take to get back to each agency? How often?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Senator Cran. Yeah, so we would like to get back into a rotating cycle of every 4 years of doing those offices. I think the governor's was 5 years. We did that report last year. It had been 5 years. And then the Attorney General and Secretary of State, I feel like one of those might have been even 7 years. So our intention is to go through those every 4 years. So you'll probably likely see us do 2 in 1 year and 2 in another year, and continue to kind of cycle through those. And even with those, generally those again fall under the full audit scope. But there are certain aspects that we'll delve into deeper, kind of a deeper dive, depending on if we hear anything from the legislature, if we hear any complaints. So that does occur at times too.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess this is a question for the audits that are not sort of yearly, but for the program evaluation, probably particularly, what's the timeline sort of from it becoming an idea to sort of the end of the audit? What is the typical timeline for that one?
Ms. Rodriguez.
Mr. Chair and Representative Greenman, typically the subcommittee or the Legislative Audit Commission selects the topics that we'll be evaluating in early April, late March. And we try to have them finished usually in the beginning of the session. So typically we will release those then in February. So it's often about a 9 to 10 month schedule.
We would likely have a letter go out to all members for topics here end of this week or next week.
Mr.
Ms.
Chair,
Rodriguez.
yes, that's our intention. Thank you.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious about the tools that you have at your disposal to do your work. I know you've got the ability to subpoena people. Can you talk about, how that happens, how it occurs, how often it's used, and other tools as well? I'm just kind of curious as to how that works operationally.
Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Drazkowski. Thanks for the question. Yes, we have a lot of unusual tools at our disposal, I would say. First of all, we have the ability to access data of any classification, and that's in law. And so that allows us to see any data that the state owns. We also, in law, have the authority to require any public official, any public employee to cooperate with us. So our law actually, and I think there's a copy of the law in your packet. It basically says that, all public officials must in all things cooperate with the legislative auditor. So that is strong authority. And then if folks don't provide us the data or don't cooperate, we do have the ability to compel that by subpoena. I would note that we use that subpoena authority very infrequently. We have used it, but because public employees understand their responsibility under law, they generally cooperate and they generally provide us the data. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work for they to talk with the agency and make sure they understand their requirements under law to work with us, but typically they do. So, over the time I have been with the office, I can only recall a handful of times that we have actually issued a subpoena, but we are certainly willing to do it if we need to.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Randall. So just kind of a follow up to that. Has anybody in government ever lied to you? And if so, what are the consequences?
Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Drazkowski. Well, I'm not sure I would always know, honestly, right, if they lie to us. There have been times when people don't tell us the full truth. The good thing about the work we do is that we don't rely on one person telling us something for us to develop a finding or a recommendation. So in addition to our ability to access data of all classification, we also have direct access to the state's accounting system. And we develop tools so that we can access state agency data directly. We conduct interviews of lots and lots of people. We conduct surveys. We have the ability to classify information as not public, which gives people a lot of comfort to be candid with us and talk with us. So usually, I think if somebody hasn't been fully truthful, we have an ability to figure that out eventually and triangulate, and then we can ask additional questions or we can present documentation and say, well, then can you help us understand this? So while I may not know if somebody's really good at lying and covering their tracks, because we do have access to so many different sources of data, I feel pretty confident that we're able to triangulate and get to the bottom of it.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Ms. Randall, I don't think employees should be lying to you. I mean, if there's a chance that, I don't know, and there's nothing in law that has any consequences for them, or is there anything in rule or law or anything? In the triangulation is good, but that should be locked tight. Any comments on that, Ms. Randall?
Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Drazkowski. There aren't consequences that leap to my mind. I mean, we do have the ability to publicly report on things. And so that can be its own type of consequence. But we do, we are aware that in our role, we've been here 50 years, we want to be here 50 more. It requires developing relationships with people so that they want to cooperate with us. And we provide them the opportunity to do so. So, I think a public report is probably the biggest consequence.
Senator Rest and then Senator Dibble.
And Senator Drazkowski, when the legislative auditor is acting like a CPA firm, reviewing the financial statements of an entity, in our case, they certainly do have the authority if they discover malfeasance or outright criminal activity. Um, I don't know whether lying comes exactly under that, but if they discover criminal activity, they certainly have the duty and the opportunity to refer it to usually the Ramsey County attorney for prosecution. And, you know, miscreants in state government, they're become notorious, even though they're not that frequent. And I recall even after, quite frankly, the legislative auditor had done a financial review, a financial audit of the Department of Revenue, they did not discover that a member of the Department of Revenue had stolen over $1 million or 2 million. Senator Curran was there at the time, so maybe he knows more about that. But it was discovered by another employee reporting it. So legislative auditor doesn't discover everything, but then they can move on it when it happens, and they do have legal recourse. It's not through the Attorney General's office; it's through the Ramsey County Attorney.
Senator Dibble, and then Senator Cran, and then we do need to adjourn it. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to totally go down this path, but Senator Drazkowski started pulling it. But I just wanted to mention something that I hope we have more discussion about in the not too distant future, and not so much misrepresentation. I mean, I'm very concerned, about misrepresentation and lying, et cetera. I'm also concerned about state agencies' efforts to hide data by virtue of policy or procedure, by utilization of third parties, external vendors, and direction that they've given to them, using relationships with attorneys, that sort of thing. I think that is, a grave and serious concern when we can't actually get to the information because it's not about, it's the sin of omission. It's rather than the sin of commission. So I think that's something to explore a little bit as a commission and as a legislative branch. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And state government has evolved, and there's a lot more vendors involved. And so you, Ms. Randall, you have the ability to track down, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Yes, we have the ability to follow the use of state funds wherever it may be, including in a nonprofit organization or including with a vendor. And state contracts are required to include a clause that explicitly gives OLA the access to information at that vendor.
Senator Cran.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble. My motto has always been what's willfully withheld is typically more damaging than the lies someone tells you. Because what's willfully withheld is the context of the future data and all data they choose to give you. I had that very same conversation with Ms. Randall around Senator Skowski's, and when you combine the totality of triangulation along with the whole host of whistleblowers and those providing the actual information, it sounds like they've done a very good job at getting to that. And then for the Department of Revenue, I also worked with that person for almost 18 years in the same business unit. I had the same capabilities as that person did as well. And so when it's difficult to stop them if you're willing to go to prison through your path in life. And in this case, I think there were 4 or 5 employees as well as the perpetrator, or a couple that were actually helped, and then benefited. I think your results show that it benefited one of our casinos locally, or all of them throughout the state, because that money was then spent immediately. But if you're willing to go to prison and consider that, it's very difficult to stop them. I'm sure the controls were, I think when I was there, I had the ability to issue refunds in upwards of $5 million. And that was a path, right? So I'm sure that threshold has been modified or highly monitored or requires more than one level of authority or secondary approval. And so it's like anything else. And that was a good one. It showed things work. And that person did go to prison. And many lost their employment in the state government who were there a very long time. So it does work. But I also like the thought, members, I think we all are in the same thought process. We just want good government and we want to make sure it works really well. And that's our job and it's our role. So I love the questioning so far of all of our new members as well, because we share those same beliefs and we're going to do everything we can to make sure the OLA has a clear path and the resources to do their job even better than they are today, if that's possible.
So members, I have a task for each of you. By 5 o'clock tomorrow, I would ask you to look. So in your packet is again a description of the 3 subcommittees. And if you could, so we have financial audit, program evaluation, and then it would be the executive committee. If you could, and it has Ms. Randall's email. If you could email Ms. Randall by 5 o'clock tomorrow. If you don't email Ms. Randall, we want to make sure that everybody is on a subcommittee. So then we'll just appoint you to something if you haven't volunteered or haven't requested. So, and that way we can get it done by the end of the week. So Ms. Randall, is that a good enough system to work on?
Mr. Chair, yes, that works well. And I'll reach out to the members who aren't here today and let them know that they need to also notify us.
Great. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.